Hello everybody and welcome to video 8 in this Django and React tutorial series. What we're going to be doing in this video is kind of starting from where we left off. We're actually going to be working on the home page, and we're going to be trying to make it so that we can actually redirect the user to the room that they're currently in if they leave the website and then rejoin it. So pretty much we're going to be styling this home page, actually making it look better than just a paragraph tag that says this is the home page. We'll have a button that says join a room. We'll have a button that says create a room. Based on what they click, they'll get redirected to those different pages. And then if the user is already in a room for some reason, say maybe they left the website and came back to it, we'll automatically redirect them to that room. So that will mean in the next video, we'll have to actually code out some more stuff on the room page itself, which will allow a user to leave the room so that they can, get into another room or create a room of their own. Anyways, we've got a lot of stuff to do, a lot of cool stuff still to come in this series. I hope you guys are excited. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that I want to do is I actually want to start working on the home page and just coding out what this should look like. So pretty much we're going to have this route right here, which is the home page. And well, we need it to look better than this paragraph tag. Now I'm actually going to put everything that I want to render here inside of a separate method or a separate function, just because it will be a little bit easier if we can have it kind of separated for what we're going to do next. But anyways, let's make a method and let's just call this render main section. Or we can even call this render home page, like that makes sense as well. Inside of here, we don't need to take anything, and we'll simply return some brackets like this, and then inside of here, what we want to render. We'll just call this function from inside of this render function, and then it'll give us all that HTML or the JSX or whatever you want to call it. Anyways, we're going to need to use a grid. We're going to need to use typography. We're going to need to use some buttons. So we need to import all of that. So let's go up here, and I'll actually just do it above React Router DOM. And I'll start by saying import. We're going to import the grid. We're going to import the button. We're going to import a new thing that I don't think we've used yet called button group. And then we are also going to import typography. Now that is all going to be from @material_UI/core. All right. So now that we have all that, let's go inside of here and let's start setting up what we want. So the first thing that I want to do is just make a grid. This is kind of standard just to make sure everything's nice and centered. So we're going to say grid. We're going to make this one a container. I'm actually going to say the spacing is equal to 3, and then I'm going to close the grid tag like that. Now inside of this grid, we're going to make 2 grid items, one for pretty much each thing that we're going to have. So we're going to have a big title. This title is going to be kind of the name of our app. I'm just going to call it House Party, but you can call this whatever you want. Feel free to change the name. And then we'll have another grid item, and this grid item will store the 2 buttons. I want to have 2 buttons horizontally aligned, one that says join room and one that says create a room. Anyways, you'll get it as we go through, but let's make the first grid item. So if I can spell grid correctly, we'll say grid item XS equals 12. We will say align equals center like that, and then close the grid. Now we can just copy this because we'll use this again down here. And in the first one, we want to put our title. So I'm going to go ahead and do a typography tag like that. We're going to say that the variant is equal to H3, so a little bit bigger than what we've been using before, which was H4. And then we'll say the component is equal to H3 as well. Now we can end the typography tag, and inside of here, we'll just put what we want our title to be. Now I said that I wanted to call mine House Party, so let's go ahead and do that and call this House Party. Nice. Now inside of the next grid, we want to set up a button group. The reason we're setting up a button group is because we want to have 2 buttons aligned horizontally. And this is just the easiest way to do this. It's literally the tag is just called button group, and it will take the 2 buttons based on kind of the stuff that we give it and make sure that they are aligned horizontally. All right. So inside of here, we're going to do our button group. So we're going to say button group. We're actually going to write this thing called disable elevation. If you want to see what it looks like with elevation, you can just remove that tag. But pretty much this is just going to remove kind of the shadow that by default is showed up that I don't want. Then I'm going to say variant of this is going to be equal to contained. This will make sure that we're aligning them horizontally. And then the color for this, for our button group, we can make it equal to primary, although it doesn't really matter what we have for that. All right, so now we have button group here. Now we're just going to define 2 buttons. We've already done this before many times. So we'll say button. We'll start by defining the color. This one will be primary, and then we'll say, what do we want this button to go to? Well, we want this to go to the /join page. Then we'll say, what component is this button? Well, the component is going to be equal to, inside of our little squiggly brackets like this, it's going to be equal to a link, which we have imported up here. All right, awesome. So then we can just close the button Actually, I guess we'll just do a full button like that. And then inside of here, we'll do our name and we'll say join a room. Okay, I'm just gonna copy this. We'll keep it inside of the button group because we want these grouped, obviously. The next one, instead of being primary, is gonna be secondary, like that. We don't wanna go to slash join, we wanna go to slash create. This too will be a link, and then instead of join a room, we can simply say create a room. All right, so now we actually have the render for our home page. We can take this and just use it inside of this render method. So inside of here, it's going to put 2 squiggly brackets and say this dot render home page. And now whenever we go to slash, we should call this function or this method, and we should show all of this JSX/HTML. All right, so let me go to my browser. Let me refresh, and you can see that now we get host party, join a room, and create a room. Now, some of you may have noticed that sometimes I'm right-clicking on this reload button in Google Chrome, and I'm pressing empty cache and hard reload. I'm messing with like a bunch of different versions of this application because I coded out before the tutorial to make sure everything looks good. So sometimes the caching is all weird. If for some reason you guys are updating stuff and you're not seeing it in your browser, if you're on Google Chrome, just make sure you open up the inspect window. So you have to have the console open, and then you can right-click on here and click on empty cache and hard reload. Anyways, let's make sure this is working. I'm going to press on join a room, brings us to the join a room page. Let's go back. Create a room brings us to the create a room page. Let's go back. Awesome. That's perfect. This is working. And that's what I wanted for my home page. Now what I want to do is make it so that if we go to the home page and we're already in a room, it automatically redirects us to that room. So to actually accomplish this, what I need to do is pretty much right when this application loads or right when this home page loads, I need to check if the user is currently in a room. And if they are in a room, then I need to redirect them. Now to do that, we need a way to check if they're in a room, right? So really we need an endpoint that we can call on the server that tells us, hey, is this user in a room? If they are, what room are they in? And then from here, we can redirect them to that room. So I'm going to start by just creating what is actually going to be kind of the entry point for this. Now, I don't think I've talked about these before, but in React, there's these things called lifecycle methods. Now, essentially, these are things that you can kind of hook into that allow you to alter the behavior of the component. So the lifecycle method that we're going to be using, this is called ComponentDidMount. So we will continue in 1 second, but I need to again thank the sponsor of this video and the series, which is Algo Expert. Algo Expert is the best platform to use to prepare for your coding interviews at large tech companies, and they recently released an awesome new feature, which is mock interviews on the platform. So you can actually sit down and perform a mock interview with another live human being, which is always some great practice. If you guys want to check out Algo Expert, have a look at it from the link in the description, and use the code TechWithTim for a discount on the platform. So ComponentDidMount pretty much means that the component just rendered for the first time on the screen. There's a bunch of different lifecycle methods. I'm not really going to go through them in depth here. You can look them up if you want to see what they are, but there's pretty much are just ways to hook into the behavior of this React component. So if you want to do something before it loads or before it actually renders on the screen, well, then you would do that in a specific lifecycle method. If you want to say, make the component not update when something specific happens, then you would hook into the should component update method or hook or whatever you want to call it, and just say, hey, no, we shouldn't update if this happens. There's a bunch of different things you can do. They actually are pretty important to understand, and we'll use more of them as we go through this tutorial. But for right now, we're just going to use ComponentDidMount. Now, some of you may be noticing that I put this async keyword here. We will need to use that. I'll discuss why in a second. But usually when you do a ComponentDidMount, you don't have the async before it. The reason we're going to have async before it is because we're going to be performing an asynchronous operation inside of ComponentDidMount. Now, if I don't put async here, in case you're not familiar with what async means, if I don't have that keyword here, that means that whatever I put in this method, we need to wait for all of that to happen before we can do anything else. And pretty much what we're going to do inside of here is we're going to call an endpoint on the server, and that could take some time, right? Imagining these things are not on the same device. Maybe the client is sitting, halfway across the world. This could take like a second or two, or maybe even just like a few milliseconds to load. So we want to make sure that the rest of our application isn't waiting on this ComponentDidMount method, and that only once this is ready to go, it actually performs the action inside of it. So if we put async here, that pretty much tells the program that, hey, this is asynchronous, which means we don't need to wait on this to finish before we can go ahead and continue doing other things in the program. But as soon as this is ready to go, or as soon as we actually receive a response from the server, and we'll see that in a second, then we'll go ahead and we'll actually execute what's happening inside of there. Anyways, I hope that kind of makes sense. as I said, and as I keep saying, it will make more sense as we go through, but I just feel like I need to explain that in case some of you guys are wondering. All right, so now that we have that, let's actually go to the server and just make our endpoint. This one's going to be really simple, and then we can call it, and then we'll actually be done for this tutorial. So what I want to do is create a new view here, and I'm just going to say class, and this one I'm just going to call user in room. Again, feel free to call this whatever you want, but we're going to inherit from API view, and all we want to do in here is simply, we're just going to send a GET request to this endpoint, and then the endpoint will check, hey, is the current user in whatever session they're in, are they in a room? And if they are, then we will return that room code. So I'm just going to define GET like that. I'm going to say self request, and then format equals, not for nat, format equals none like that. And then here I'm going to say data equals to, and then we're just going to do a blank Python dictionary. We're going to say code. This is what we'll use as, I guess, the key for returning our actual room code. And then we'll say that's equal to self.request.session.get, and then room underscore code. Now notice this is the same thing that I'm using inside of here, right? When I actually update the user session and add that information telling us, hey, what room this user is actually in. So it probably would make sense to actually make kind of a global variable at the top of this file that says, room code field or something. And then we put that inside of all of here so they're consistent, but for now it's fine. We'll just leave it as a string room code. So this is how you get information from the session. If there is no room code, it will simply return none. Now there is one thing that we need to quickly do inside of here. We need to make sure that the user actually has a session. So we're going to do the exact same thing that we've done previously. We're just going to take this right here and put this at the top of our function here, at the top of our method, just to make sure that we actually do indeed have a session, because if we don't have a session, well, that is problematic. So now that we have that, what we're going to do is we're simply going to return a JSON response. Now we have not used this yet, so I'll discuss it in a second. What this does is take a Python dictionary and serialize it using a JSON serializer, and then sends that information back to the front end, or sends it in the request. So just like we had, this, I guess, room serializer, right? It's the exact same thing, except we're just going to take an arbitrary Python dictionary rather than a Python object like a room or, like database models that we had. So let's go to the top of the file here, and we're going to say from Django dot, what is it here? I think it's HTTP. We're going to import JSON response like that. So there we go. We have JSON response. And now all we have to do is inside of JSON response, we're going to pass the data that we actually want to send. And then we need to pass the status code. So we're going to say status equals status dot HTTP underscore 200 underscore OK. Again, remembering that if they're not in a room, we'll simply return none. So we can handle that case on the front end where we say, hey, user is not in room, so we aren't going to redirect them. All right, now we need to set up the URL for this. So let's go to urls.py. Let's import user in room like that. And now let's make our path. So we're going to say path. I guess we can call this user in room. I mean, I guess that makes sense. That's what we call to the class. And then that will be user in room dot as underscore view. All right, so now we have our URL, we have our API endpoint. All that's left to do is actually call it and then kind of handle the logic or handle what happens based on the response that we get. So let's go back to our home page. Now inside of here, I am simply going to actually fetch or send this request so that we can get if the user is in the room. So I'm going to fetch /API/user-in-room. Remember not to add the trailing slash, otherwise that's going to cause an issue. We're then going to say .then. Here we're going to take a response and we're going to return the response.json like that, and this will have to have parentheses. We're then going to say .then one more time. Here, this is going to take data, and then what we're going to do is actually something that I've not yet talked about, but let's just save that and get that going. So what's going to happen right now is we're going to call API/user-in-room. This is going to return to us whether or not we are in a room. And if we are in a room, we are going to actually get that room code coming in through the field called code. And then what we'll do is we'll return the response.json. So we'll just get the JSON from our response. That will then go to this .then. So now we'll have data, which is really just a JSON object. Then we can parse and look through this JSON object and pretty much get the room code. So what I want to do is I want to store this room code in the state of this home page, and then I want to use that inside of my render method to determine whether or not I need to redirect us to another page. So you'll see kind of why and how this works, but let's start by just setting some state. So we're going to say this dot set state like that, and that's going to be equal to room code, and by default this will be null. So now we have some state. So what we'll do inside of this dot then that we haven't yet written is we will say this, nope, not touchless, what am I saying? This dot set state, and then in here we'll say room code is equal to data dot code. Now, if for some reason or I guess if in the situation where this code is none, we will just update room code to be equal to null once again. So that will be totally fine, and all will still work. All right, so now that we have that, what we can do is actually use this state inside of our render method. And remember that pretty much the way this ComponentDidMount is working is once we've rendered the page, so we've actually already called this render method one time, we will asynchronously do this operation. So once this is done and this has completed, we will have set the state. And this setting of the state will force our component to re-render. So once it re-renders, then we'll say, oh, we have a new room code. Down here, we'll see that we have a new room code, and we can go to that room code. Because by default, when we start this application, the room code will be equal to null. So on the first render, it will show us the home page. And then after this ComponentDidMount is finished running, we'll see, hey, we have a room that we're actually in. We need to go to that, and then it will redirect us there based on the logic that I put inside of render. So inside of render, what I'm going to do is kind of do a weird thing here, but I'm going to go inside of my route for the home page. And pretty much I have two cases, right? I have the case where we're in a room and the case where we're not in a room. So I need a way to tell us whether, hey, we redirect to the room or we just show the contents of the home page. So I'm going to say render. This is actually, I guess a method or something that you can hook into, and you can change what happens when this route is rendering something, right? So here we have component is a room join page. Here, when I define render, this just means that if we're on this route, it will call this render method. And whatever we put inside of here is what's going to show up. Okay, so I will actually remove this here. And now what I want to do is inside of render, I need to make an arrow function. This is because whatever I put inside of here, this is the function that's going to be called when I'm rendering this route. So if we are actually on this route, then we will render whatever, or we will call this function, which will then return to us whatever we should render. So inside of here, I've done an arrow function. I open up my parentheses again. Now I'm going to return, and we're going to actually use the ternary operator here to check if we have a room code or not. So I'm going to say this.state.roomCode question mark. In the situation where we actually do have a room code, then what we need to do is we need to redirect to that room code. So I'm going to put parentheses here, and we will redirect in that situation. And then I'm going to say colon, and in the colon, I'm just going to say this dot render render homepage. Yeah, I think that's what we called it, right? This dot render homepage. Yeah, this dot render homepage. Now, for some reason, that's giving me all kinds of issues. Let me just wrap this. Oh, I think it's because I didn't put something here. Okay, so I don't know what's going on, but I think it's just because I haven't actually finished writing what I need to put inside of here. But anyways, what we're going to do inside of these parentheses here is we're just going to say redirect, and we're going to redirect to, and then inside of here, we're going to have to actually grab the room code and redirect to that. So, oops, not a 0. We'll say 2, and then we'll use our backticks like we've done previously, and we'll go to /room $, open the curly braces, and then this dot state dot room code. So now what will happen is if we are in the situation where we have a room code, we'll simply have this redirect component, which will just redirect us to the correct page. Now, again, I don't know why I'm getting this weird syntax error. So let me just have a look, and then, oh, it's because I did not end this redirect tag. Okay, so now that I end that, there we go. Now it's all working. So pretty much what we have is if we have a room code, redirect to that. Otherwise, simply render the home page. Now, I think that is all good. And now what we need to do is actually just see if this is working. So that should be it. Let's have a quick refresh here. You can see I was looking at this ComponentDidMount to make sure that I was telling you guys the right thing. Let's close that. Let's refresh. Empty cache and hard reload. And what's going on here? Do we have any issues in the console? Doesn't look like we do, but we can see this is just loading like crazy and just constantly loading. And what do we have here? Uncaught type, cannot read property room code of null. Okay, so let me just have a quick look and see what's going wrong here, and I will be right back. All right, so I found what the issue is. Apparently I had this.setState equals. This really should be this.state equals. So my apologies about that, just an issue in the constructor here, and that was causing us to have a problem. So let's give a quick refresh here. And now we can see that this actually does redirect us to the room. So if I go back to the home page, you can see that it flashes for a second, that home page, and then it redirects us over here. So let's actually just go to /join. And then we can go back and we can see that boom, automatically redirects us back to the home page. Now, or sorry, not the home page, but to the room page that we're in. Now, we probably don't want that behavior exactly to be happening, but pretty much what we're going to do now or in the next video is we'll add a button and we'll add some kind of nicer styling to this page that will let us actually leave the room. So then we'll again send a request to the backend. It will then remove that from our session. And then that way, when we go back to the home page, it doesn't, flash and then show us this. It just keeps us on the home page. So anyways, that was all I wanted to show you guys in this video. That's how we can use the user session to actually redirect them to the room that they're in. So now say, I close this tab and I go back to this page, it just automatically brings me into the room. So I don't need to press the code again. I don't need to rejoin. And that way it's just more convenient. Say, like you close your Safari app on your phone, the example I keep giving, and then you open it back up. You're already in the room you were in before. All right, so we're making some really good progress on this app. Again, I hope you guys are learning a lot and you're excited about what's coming in the future of this series because I definitely am. So with that said, if you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you again in another YouTube video.